Hello, I'm here this afternoon to talk about Teddy Roosevelt or Theodore Roosevelt. I put together this presentation, had all kinds of other stuff. What I really thought would be more fun is I wanted to talk about what the study of Theodore Roosevelt meant to me. He was our 26th president. As I did the study, I found him to be probably one of our most influential presidents in history. He took America, which was kind of an isolationist kind of country. We were just getting started, worried probably more about our own selves than we were being a part of national politics. And he came in with a vision and a heart and made us emerge as a world leader. One of the things about Theodore Roosevelt that I thought was so impressive, and I think a lot of people today should look at, was his relationship with his father. It's kind of interesting to me when we look at some of the problems we're having in culture today, and then you look at somebody like Theodore Roosevelt from the 1850s to early 1900s, and that was his life. 1858, I believe, is when he was born. Let me look here real quick to 1919. When I was reading his autobiography, he said the man that he thought the most of, or the most respected man in his life, was his father. And he describes some of the attributes of his father: honest, fair, hardworking, challenging, and that those same moral characters or virtues were what we find in Theodore Roosevelt Jr. He was hardworking. Another thing that I found very impressive about him was he was born very sick, asthma, what we would have called Coke bottle glasses. No insult intended. I wear glasses too. So he probably was a little bit of what we would call a nerdy kid. Did not go to school. He was homeschooled when I was reading his autobiography. And I found this in some other places too. I know some other people noticed this. But his father had a saying that he had a strong mind, but if his mind was going to achieve all that it could, his body had to support it. So Theodore Roosevelt began to work on strengthening his body. His father put a gym in the second floor of their townhouse in New York City. And he exercised, he wrestled, took judo, which was very unusual back then, and strengthened himself to become quite the man, quite the strong man's man, if you will. The other thing I thought was really neat about him is he was born to money, so he was an aristocrat. He could have had a very easy life. He was very intelligent, had a knack for school, was doing very well at Harvard, was even possibly pursuing the life of a scientist. One of the things that turned him from that, and I personally believe two things that turned him from that. One was scientists back then spent more time in the lab. Theodore Roosevelt loved the outdoors. He wanted to go outside. He was a naturalist, if you will, and he wanted to be out there doing things. Second thing is his father passed away, and I think I believe, and I've had to deal with a number of people in their last days, I believe he looked at life, he understood the brevity of life, and he wanted to do something he loved. And he was very good at politics. He was very good at talking to people, influencing people, which I mean, think about it today. One of the quotes on my desk, and I hate to admit this, that I did not realize was Theodore Roosevelt's until I did this study, but I find quotes, speeches, and things from Theodore Roosevelt today. So quite the amazing man. I digress a little bit. So here's Theodore Roosevelt, sickly child. He strengthens himself, discovers that he has a real knack for politics, for talking to people, for motivating people. We have the Spanish-American War that takes place. I'm sorry, let me jump back. So he falls into politics in New York City. He goes in and fixes the police department, which is really amazing. When I read some stories about that, not only did he fix it, but he took care of the poor. The other really neat thing, and I've got to watch my time, the other really neat thing about Theodore Roosevelt is here he came from money, but he cared about some of the poorest. While he was a policeman, or police commissioner, was he police commissioner in New York City? He was fixing the police department, which was corrupt and not doing their job and a lot of issues going on. But he noticed that the poor had no place to go. He noticed that the poor kids didn't have anywhere to play or anywhere to go. And I love his quote. He goes, if we don't want them to become toughies, which if you look at up, don't want to become thugs. We need a place for them to go. We need better schools. He fought for better schools and playgrounds for some of the most neglected in society at that time. Amazing man. Spanish-American War breaks out. Here goes Theodore Roosevelt off to create the Rough Riders. Now that's kind of neat. He creates the Rough Riders, and I looked at it, and I've heard the stories. But what impressed me the most about the Rough Riders was the fact that I read letters from some of the men that served with him. And they talked about his willingness to go out against the Spanish rifles. They talked about his charge up the hill. Just amazing as you read those stories. I could just picture Theodore Roosevelt, somebody that by society's term, aristocrat, somebody that should have been in the back, out there in the front leading his men. And I think I put in my paper, it's one thing to lead men to work in a company, to take a chance with their monies, but it's another thing to lead men to take a chance with their life. It just really inspired me at the leadership that man must have had. His servant leadership we see when he takes care of his poor. His leadership to inspire others when he inspires them to attack a hill during the Spanish-American War, which he received an award for posthumously after he was already gone. Something else about Theodore Roosevelt that I found really amazing was his ability to overcome. We talked about I spoke about his ability to overcome sickness, but we find out that his mother and wife die on the same day. Theodore Roosevelt, and he has a child at this time. We could question leaving a child with family or friends and then taking off and going out west and establishing a cattle ranch. But he didn't quit. He didn't fall apart. He went out west, established that, comes back to America, and does many, many great things. I'm about ready to run out of time. I know it couldn't be over 8 minutes, and I'm sitting here at almost 7 something. I want to say that I was really inspired by Theodore Roosevelt. I was inspired by his strength to overcome adversity. I was inspired by his willingness to go against the grain. I was inspired by his ability to inspire the best in people. What I hope and what I feel like I gained the most was, don't be afraid to go against the grain. Make sure that you have your facts together. Make sure that you've really thought through it. And maybe most importantly, stand by your morals. Be honest. Wholesome might be another way to look at it. Anyway, I'm almost out of time. I hope this was a good presentation. I hope my paper did really well. And it's been a good class, and I've enjoyed it. Best holidays. Bye.